There's a game we play called Superheroes, where I'm a superhero and looking for a new sidekick. So we give each of them either superpowers or superpower names. This woman came up and I said, so what's your superpower? And she said, delayed gratification. So there's that moment where you're improvising, where you go, do I follow this up? She was an older woman, so I felt, you know what? I think it's going to be, I don't know why. I thought, no, this is going to be all right. So I said, all right, let me give you an example. Say a bank is being robbed. What would you do? She goes, I would go up to the bank, but I wouldn't go in right away. And I thought, okay, amazing. And the audience loved it. And I loved it too, because those are the kinds of things that 1,000 seasoned improvisers would never come up with. There's just some stream of consciousness in their own wacky little minds that comes out and gives us a show.
I'm Peter McCully. What happens when you get an improv legend and a master hypnotist together? You get HYPROV, improv under hypnosis. If it sounds like fun, it is. We're chatting with Colin Mochrie and Asad Mecci on this edition of Today in BC. Thanks for joining us on the podcast today, Colin and Asad.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, Peter.
I'm hoping to leave the interview at the end and not cluck like a chicken.
Oh, there we go.
Off the top, Peter. Yes, no mercy, huh? I want to be very clear about our show, HYPROV, Improv Under Hypnosis. Right. We create an instant improv troupe out of the people who are on stage. We don't embarrass them. We don't make them cluck like a chicken or bark like a dog. They become an instant improv troupe with us. They are under hypnosis and they improvise with the greatest improviser on the planet, Colin Mochrie from Whose Line Is It Anyway? It is an elevated show, Peter.
Colin, you were born in Scotland and you moved to Montreal as a youngster, ended up in Vancouver, attended theater school, and discovered your somewhat good friend, Ryan Stiles. You must have fond memories of British Columbia.
Oh, I love Vancouver. I love BC. It was where I discovered improv. My family still lives there. To me, it's hands down like one of the most beautiful cities. Mountains, you got the ocean, and you have me every once in a while.
I've got to ask, since you're Scottish and lived in Montreal, have you ever done improv in Gaelic and or in French?
No, I haven't. But I saw at the Just for Laughs Festival an entire improv match in French. And I don't speak French, but I got the gist of it. There was a team from Brussels against a Quebec team. And one of the challenges was they had to do a scene in each other's accent. That was fascinating. Again, I had no idea what they were talking about, but it was very funny.
Asad, who are the people that you saw who got you interested in being a hypnotist when you were younger? I was thinking that being in Ontario, you probably saw The Great Ravine more than once.
It's a little bit before my time, but I will tell you that Mike Mandel was one of my influences as well as one of my mentors. I think that watching him work and perform was something that really caught my eye and got me interested in hypnosis for sure.
The Great Ravine's son is out on the road doing the Great Ravine show now.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I remember every year he hit the Queen Elizabeth Theatre in Vancouver. I know Ryan was a big fan.
I was growing up in Halifax and he showed up every spring and every fall. And that's where the reference came from, cluck like a chicken.
I did have the opportunity to meet Peter Ravine in Las Vegas. And I went to his mansion, beautiful place, and we chatted about his background and how he got started. And he was a very gracious man. Of course, he's passed now, but he was definitely a gentleman and a scholar when I talked to him.
What I love is hypnotists have mansions, improvisers have bungalows, if they're lucky.
In Vegas at the time, he was managing a magician, Lance Burton, at the time. He's retired from hypnosis and he was managing Lance Burton. Lance Burton's show was phenomenal. HYPROV has a residency in Vegas. We're at the Harris Casino. We've been open for about 3 months. And Colin is one of the improvisers on the show. He flies in and out. We're sharing a beautiful theater with the great Donny Osmond. So Donny goes on at 7:30 and then we perform at 9:30. So I like to always say that Donny Osmond is opening up for HYPROV, and I just and joke when I say that.
Colin and Donny and I are probably all about the same age.
Some of us may be older. It's hard to say.
I couldn't believe it. I just have to say, Donny Osmond is in incredible shape. He was doing karate on stage. He was using a bow staff. He was dancing and singing. Unbelievable for his age.
If you watch our show, I get in and out of a chair twice without any help.
I'm there with you. I first discovered Colin Mochrie on Second City as Bond, James Bond. There's that Scottish thing again. And if I'm not mistaken, you did some memorable Canadian TV commercials as well. One I seem to recall you had wings.
Did I? Well, I was the snack fairy where I had a nice little tutu. And yeah, that was a good gig. That fixed our porch. So that was always
Asad, you've got a background with Second City as well. You were taking some classes there.
Yeah, I studied there levels A through D at the Second City. It was phenomenal to learn their structure. And I think it really helped me in my solo act. And it was really the jumping off point for HYPROV because I realized what they were doing at the Second City. They would often say, get out of your head. You're too much in your head. And what I realized is what they wanted was unconscious comedy. They wanted a knee-jerk reaction from the people who were studying at their classes. And they would use all of these tools to get people to get out of their heads. I thought, wait a second, is it possible to hypnotize somebody who has no experience in improv and turn them into a great improviser by hacking the process? And the answer has been a resounding yes. And is it possible to take it to the next level and raise the bar even further and have that person who is hypnotized improvise with the world's greatest living improviser, Peter? That's Colin Mochrie from Whose Line Is It Anyway?
You didn't have to put the name in there. They know. They all know.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, Colin, because some people are familiar here in North America with the fact that the show is of British origin, and you started in Britain with Whose Line Is It Anyway? That it jumped the pond, as they say. You were with Drew Carey, and now the newer series with Aisha Tyler. A question from our podcast mailbag is for you, Colin. Tell us about working with Richard Simmons when he was on the show.
I certainly will. The beauty of our show is we have guest stars every once in a while who just pop in, do some scenes with us. And that's the only time I ever see them because we don't see them before the show. They're usually gone by the end of the show. Richard came on, did a couple of scenes, and then he ended up doing a scene with us that, in all humility, I think is like one of the funniest things that's been on television. He and Wayne, we played objects for Ryan and I, and we made them various things. But the most famous thing, I made him into a jet ski. In the final product, they actually had to edit down the laughter because it had just gone wild. It was like 2 minutes straight of just laughter. And I don't know if any of you have had Richard Simmons' head bobbing at your crotch for 2 minutes. That is a long time. It really is a long time. So it's uncomfortable as you're, it's come on, please stop laughing so we can move on. God bless him. He was committed and he made that scene because of his commitment and his ability to just have fun.
Asad, you were talking about the fact that HYPROV allows people to be uninhibited and react quickly to any suggestion that you might have for them. So nothing is rehearsed and you have no idea who you're working with and no idea what the reactions are going to be to either of you. That's like walking a comedic tightrope, isn't it?
It absolutely is. We don't use plants. We've never met any of these people before. They're just random volunteers from the audience who come up on stage. So the format of the show is I bring up 20 volunteers, I hypnotize them, whittle it down to the best subjects, and then enter a world-class improviser. And the improviser then improvises with the people on stage while they're under hypnosis. So far, we've had incredible improvisers. Obviously, Colin Mochrie from Whose Line Is It Anyway, the legend himself. We've had Jonathan Mangum from Let's Make a Deal. We've had Stephanie Courtney Flo from the Progressive commercials. We've had Jeff Hiller, Somebody Somewhere. We've had Mindy Sterling from the Austin Powers franchise. We've had some incredible improvisers that have come into the show. The show has really taken on a life of its own. When I originally pitched Colin this concept back in 2015 at the Second City, we had no idea that this would then snowball into 70 shows off Broadway, 80 cities across North America, and now a residency in Las Vegas. The success of the show is astounding, and we are both excited, but at the same time shocked at the level of success of the show. It is just unbelievable.
I asked Siri to find me a few videos on the internet of your HYPROV show, and they were hilarious. One was a slow motion pie and haggis fight. There's your Scottish DNA again. And an emotional symphony, which was hilarious.
Oh, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. As Asad said, it really is shocking. Our very first show, because we couldn't rehearse anything, it was like walking out into the lion's den and hoping that the lions were on your side. And just before we went out, I said to Asad, hey, if I ask them to do this, will they do it? And then he looked at me with all his hypnotic mastery and said, I don't know, because every subject is different. He said, yes, some will react immediately. Some may not. I thought, oh, that's going to be horrible. But it actually ended up basically just like any improv show. There are times when you give something to another improviser and they don't react right away, but you find ways around that. From our first show to the show we're doing now, the change is incredible in what we've asked them to do. We've got more complicated scenes. As long as we can explain to them in one sentence what their role is, then everything is fine. We have people doing things that amaze me. Every night as I watch Asad put people under, I go, how is this going to work? How is he doing this? How am I going to do this? And every night it works.
Peter, the crescendo of the show is an old-time radio play where we have one person playing all the different characters that Colin comes into contact with. So they morph and they change into the different characters that Colin comes into contact with. We actually have one individual who is the superstar of the show that night. And they actually keep up with Colin. They're giving great offers to Colin. They're entertaining, they're funny, and sometimes, just sometimes, they'll steal a scene from Colin because they're so funny. We are unlocking their hidden inner comedic genius in HYPROV.
When Today in BC continues, Asad Mecci talks hypnotism, and Colin Mochrie tells us about improvising comedy sketches with Robin Williams.
From the latest community news to informative, entertaining reads for travelers and the cannabis curious, just visit your local Black Press Media community newspaper website to sign up today.
Why spend hours searching dealerships, comparing makes and models? Find the best of BC's inventory in one place, todaysdrive.com. You'll have access to inventory across BC, where you can easily find a vehicle that fits your needs and gets you where you need to go in comfort. Get in the driver's seat. Don't miss out on the many options we have available for you. Powered by Black Press Media, todaysdrive.com connects you with exclusive new and used car deals.
I'm Peter McCully. Today in BC is a Black Press Media podcast. Asad, what makes a person a good subject for hypnosis? What do you look for?
I'm looking for physiological feedback when people come up on stage. So I'm looking for changes in rate and location of respiration. So breathing changes. So you breathe from your upper chest, your middle chest, your lower chest. I'm looking for changes in skin. You have a lightness and darkness to the skin. You'll actually shift from light to dark to light. Changes in skin tonus. There's a shininess and a dullness to the skin. Vasodilation, so the capillaries in the eyes become engorged. When 20 volunteers come up on stage, they already start to exhibit some trance indicators, and those would look like riveted attention, which is they look at me like I'm the most important thing on the planet. They're solely focused on me and they're tracking me. And then mask-like facial expression, which would be equivalent to a poker face. So they have an expressionless face and they have riveted attention. So out of the 20, I'm already picking up on these indicators as soon as they sit down. It's hard to fake these, like eyelid fluttering, for example, where the eyelids start to flutter. You come close to somebody who's hypnotized on stage, you can actually see their eyelids fluttering. In some subjects, very hard to fake that physiological feedback.
Can you make someone do something that they would not ordinarily do, be outside of their comfort zone when they're on stage hypnotized?
Yeah, so hypnosis is context-driven. People who come up on stage, they know that they're a part of a comedy, improv, and hypnosis show. There's informed consent. They know that what they're going to do up on stage is going to be wacky, bizarre, strange, comedic, right? So in that context, they'll do things that they normally wouldn't do, but they're not going to do anything that they don't want to do.
I am very susceptible to post-hypnotic suggestion. Years ago, I quit smoking for a couple of years through a hypnotist. They would ping a wine glass and I would be out like a light. I have a relaxation tape, which has been working for about 15 years, which I got from a hypnotherapist. So my question is, because I'm so open to post-hypnotic suggestion, could I be hypnotized by you on this video chat, or does it have to be an in-person experience? Because I got to tell you, I'd be more fun than a barrel of monkeys.
The answer would be yes, it's possible to hypnotize somebody virtually. And I've done Zoom sessions in the past where I would hypnotize people for stress management or peak performance or motivation, goal attainment. So the answer is yes.
Do we want to do that now?
Oh, God, no. Come to the show, BC.
Yeah.
See the show. You don't want to hear us hypnotizing Peter on the podcast, for God's sake. Come to see the show.
Colin, as you mentioned, the show is toured extensively. You're racking up air miles everywhere. And you play in Las Vegas. Are there parts of the country or parts of the world where folks are more uninhibited when it comes to how they react to the situations that you put them in?
I don't think we found anything geography-wise. Vegas tends to be a little more, I don't know if it's cynical, or they tend to sit back a little bit, but once they're up there, they react like every other part of the country we've gone to. When Asad says, we're looking for 20 people, it's just a stampede. And I personally don't understand it because it would be the last thing in the world I want to do. But everywhere we go, no matter in Canada, in the States, small towns, bigger towns, people want to be a part of the show. They come up with just the best stuff that real improvisers would never come up with, just to keep me on my toes.
I was reading an account of a person in Ontario that was hypnotized to one of the shows and said he didn't really remember much about being on stage, but will remember when someone said to him, do you remember saying this to Colin?
I would say most people remember everything. Some people, I think, have little patches. And Asad, correct me if I'm wrong, as I'm sure you will. Time is a different construct when you're hypnotized.
I think that definitely there's time distortion when somebody's hypnotized. Really good hypnotic subjects, they'll think that the hypnosis show lasted, we've only been up there for 10 minutes, whereas the show's gone on for 90 minutes. I give the suggestion that they'll remember everything that they've done up on stage. And the idea is that we want to ensure that these people come out of the hypnosis and feel great. We send them back to the audience in a great state. That's the key for the show. We want to ensure that our volunteers are safe and that when they come out of it, they have a really great experience to share with their friends and family afterwards.
Part of the show is, of course, it's fun and entertaining, but we're also trying to show what happens when you stop yourself from being an improviser. Asad doesn't turn these people into improvisers. He dampens the part of the brain that tells them they can't be. There's no self-criticism. They're open to everything we give them. They're also aware the entire night. From the audience, it looks like they're sleeping, but they're totally aware of everything. I've been in scenes where someone has referenced 3 scenes before that they weren't in. People come, I think, to these shows with a lot of misconceptions about hypnosis, and hopefully it'll be a little clearer by the end of this one.
To Colin's point, Peter, the part of the brain that deals with self-reflection becomes disconnected when somebody's hypnotized, so they no longer reflect on their behavior. First-time improvisers, they'll play to the audience, they'll look nervous, they'll use filler words. These people, they just react immediately without hesitation, without question to the suggestions that I give to them, which makes for really great improv. When you watch Colin and Wayne Brady and Ryan Stiles doing Whose Line Is Anyway, that it's seamless. There's no hesitation. They just jump right in and they're committed. With really good hypnotic subjects, that's the same caliber of performance we get out of them.
I wanted to go back to something you mentioned about hypnotizing people, Asad, that had my complete attention, which was losing weight through hypnotism. I'm still carrying around all this COVID weight, and I would dearly love to be rid of it, like a lot of folks. How do you manage to have someone lose weight through hypnotism?
Funny that you brought that up. I was just written up in the Toronto Star. I was working with Leanne Delep from The Kit and the Toronto Star. She hit her fitness goals, lost weight. We ran a few different suggestions around imagery. There's process-driven imagery, which is imagining all the steps that you need to take to get to your goal, which is eating right, sleeping right, exercising 6 days a week, 45 minutes every day, getting 11 glasses of water, sleep 8 hours a night. That's the kind of imagery that you're running in your mind. And then goal-driven imagery, which would be imagining that you've attained your goal. You imagine in your mind's eye that you've attained the goal that you want to hit. So that's goal-driven imagery and process-driven imagery. And you run that imagery in your mind when you're hypnotized. It sets up a blueprint for the unconscious mind to be compelled towards.
I know you got upset with all the steps there, like exercising, and although I could see your face go, oh, you can't just lose it.
Colin, I did want to ask you about being on stage with Robin Williams on Whose Line. I had the opportunity to interview Jan Rabson on our podcast, who had worked with and appeared with Robin at the Comedy Store in his early days before he got his start in Mork and Mindy. And he said, and I quote, when you were on stage with Robin, you were basically a prop.
Yes, that could be true. I didn't find that on the show. He came on the show, and of course, he was a big inspiration to all of us. And he was an Oscar winner doing our show, which still boggles the mind. We had 2 Oscar winners, Whoopi and Robin. But Robin was one of those people, knew all of the crew's names within 10 minutes, and was just one of the improvisers. We had a lot of fun. Everybody worked well together. Everyone's energy was up by 150% because there's no way you can just relax. It was like everybody was so energized by it. I know that was a special show for all of us, and we were happy he joined us.
You also had the opportunity in the early days to work in Ontario a couple of years on a television show with Ron James, who's visited us before. A show called Blackfly, I believe.
God bless you. Yeah. Ron and my wife, Deb, were in the same cast at Second City. So they've been friends forever. And then once I married Deb, I got to know Ron, just one of the funniest guys in the world. I've never laughed so hard at someone on and off stage. And he's one of those people where things happen to him. And then he makes an amazing, using his incredible vocabulary, just paints this tapestry of woe and incredible humor.
A question for both of you. Could you tell us some of the more unexpected situations that you've been in after hypnotizing an audience member for the show? Something they've said, something they've done?
I'll jump in there first. I was watching the radio play again, where one of the volunteers playing all the different characters that Colin is coming into contact with. And Colin is a detective. We found out later that this woman was a farmer. That was her personal history, and we had no idea. We had no information about that. Colin ends up talking to her. It's some convoluted story about a duck driving a bus. She says to Colin, ducks are fun. And Colin says, I didn't think I'd ever hear that on stage. And she said, you haven't been around a lot of ducks. It was so quirky and weird and off the wall and strange that it stuck with me. She just retorted so fast, and there was no hesitation. It was just immediate. And it got a huge laugh from the audience because we were in rural Ontario. But they got it because, I guess, ducks are fun.
There's a game we play called Superheroes, where I'm a superhero. I'm looking for a new sidekick. So we give each of them either superpowers or superpower names. This woman came up and I said, so what's your superpower? And she said, delayed gratification. So there's that moment where you're improvising, where you go, do I follow this up or do I just... She was an older woman. So I felt, you know what? I think it's going to be, I don't know why. I thought, no, this is going to be all right. So I said, all right, let me give you an example. Say a bank is being robbed. What would you do? She goes, I would go up to the bank, but I wouldn't go in right away. And I thought, okay, amazing. And the audience loved it. And I loved it too, because those are the kinds of things that 1,000 seasoned improvisers would never come up with. There's just some stream of consciousness in their own wacky little minds, either it's about ducks or delayed gratification, that comes out and gives us a show.
Colin, we've heard Asad talk about how hypnotism drops everyone's guard and they become a better improviser. When you're on stage with your crew and doing improv, you're not hypnotized. What's the secret to performing improv comedy? How can you react so quickly to what somebody gives you as a situation?
Well, here's an interesting thing. We were doing a show in San Francisco. There's a doctor there doing a study on what happens to the brain when you improvise. So he asked me, would you be part of this study? So I went to the university and I improvised in an MRI for an hour and a half. It's not as much fun as it sounds. I did find out I'm not claustrophobic. Afterwards, what he told me was the part of the brain that deals with self-criticism activity goes away. And the part of the brain that deals with creativity blossoms. So somehow improvisers do naturally what Asad does through hypnosis. I think basically it's just having no shame and being able to relax enough that you're just playing off each other. Of course, I've been incredibly fortunate. I've been surrounded by great improvisers, and that makes it easier. But I find, having worked with the hypnotized subjects, I think I've actually become a better improviser. When I'm working with the Who's Line guys, there's a comfort zone there. I guess sometimes a bit of a laziness because I know what they're going to do, and so I can just follow along and then take over when I have to. But with the hypnotized people, I don't have that. I have to listen to everything they're saying because there could be a nugget in there we can use. It could take the scene into a new direction. And that's been fascinating for me. It's really given me a second life in improv.
Colin Mochrie and Asad Mecci of HYPROV have been our guests on this edition of Today in BC. If you have suggestions or comments, send us a voice message to podcast@blackpress.ca. You may be part of our podcast mailbag segment. You'll find Today in BC podcasts on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, iHeart, YouTube, and Google Podcasts.